way forward were the focus of deliberations at the annual general meetings of African Development Bank Group held recently in Accra, Ghana. In his opening address, President of the Africa Development Bank Group, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, noted that the issues of climate change, energy shortage, and food crisis are major problems facing the continent. Speaking at the AGM with the theme, Achieving Climate Resilience and a Just Energy Transition for Africa, Dr. Adesina highlighted the plans by AFDB to mitigate the negative effect of climate change and energy crisis, as well as ensuring food security across countries in Africa. According to him, Africa suffers $7 to $15 billion per year in losses to climate change, which are projected to rise to $40 billion per year by 2030. Africa has no choice but to adapt to climate change, and to support the continent in doing so, the African Development Bank has doubled its financing for climate to $25 billion by 2025. He maintained that the bank and the Global Center on Adaptation are implementing the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, AAAP, with the goal of mobilizing $25 billion in climate adaptation financing for Africa. He, however, stated that the bank needs more financing to ensure many more low-income countries. According to him, the bank is leading on securing Africa's food supplies in the face of climate change, noting that 6 years ago, the bank launched the Feed Africa strategy, which is the goal to deliver climate-resilient agricultural technologies at scale to farmers and feed Africa. He stated that the bank is achieving incredible success, noting that the Feed Africa work has already benefited over 76 million farmers with access to improved agricultural technologies. Also, the flagship program, Technologies for Africa Agricultural Transformation, TAAT, has delivered climate-smart seeds to 12 million farmers in 27 countries in just 2 years. To tackle the looming food crisis in Africa from the Russian war in Ukraine, he said the African Development Bank and the African Union Commission developed an Africa Emergency Food Production Plan. The $1.5 billion plan will be used to support African countries to produce food rapidly. The plan will produce 38 million metric tons of food, including wheat, maize, rice, and soybeans. The total value of the additional food production is $12 billion. $1.5 billion investment will deliver $12 billion, a leverage factor of 8 times. The plan, according to him, will deliver climate and agricultural technologies to 20 million farmers. He maintained that Africa does not need bows in hand, but Africa needs seeds in the ground and mechanical harvesters to harvest bountiful food produced locally, saying Africa must feed itself with pride, as there is no dignity in begging for food. The African Development Bank, he noted, is also spearheading just energy transition for Africa. Since 2009, the bank has not funded any new coal projects. Not funding coal has now been formalized as a policy with the new energy policy approved by the Board of Directors of AFDB. He, however, stated that progress will depend on developed economies fulfilling their commitment to provide at least $100 billion climate finance annually to developing countries, adding that Africa must ensure that promises made at COP26 in Glasgow must now be delivered at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, at the Africa COP. According to Adesina, Africa can accelerate its development rights of the International Monetary Fund. Africa needs to have reallocation of $100 billion from developed economies, as agreed to by the African heads of state at the Conference on Financing Africa Economies hosted by President Emmanuel Macron. The African Union has called for a reallocation of the SDRs to Africa, with a portion of it going through the African Development Bank. He appreciated each of the donor countries, saying they have been partners in the journey of hope of the countries that are supported by ADF to give greater hope to cope with increasing challenges. The ADF countries need greater resources. One way to achieve this is to allow the African Development Fund to use its accumulated equity of 25 billion naira to leverage 33 billion, adding that the fund will be able to deliver more.
There are millions of Africans who we serve every day who are not here. Yet, we must see them. Yet, we must hear their voices. Yet, we must feel their needs in all that we do. For we do not represent ourselves. We represent them. Lives are affected every day by climate change. Majority of them, women. Many of their lives are affected by lack of electricity. From a kid struggling to read with candles or lanterns, or the occasional street light in their neighborhoods, to a mother who straps her baby on her back, using fuel wood and charcoal to cook, yet exposing herself and our child to the effects of fumes that endanger their lives. So, the theme of our annual meetings, achieving climate resilience and a just energy transition, is all about people. Africa is the least emitter of carbon emissions in the world, accounting for only 4% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. Yet, the continent suffers disproportionately from the negative impacts of climate change, including increased frequency and intensity of droughts, cyclones, floods, compounded by desertification. Climate change is simply short-changing African economies. Africa suffers $7 to $15 billion per year in losses to climate change, which are projected to rise to $40 billion per year by 2030. Africa has no choice but to adapt to climate change that it did not cause. To support the continent in doing so, the African Development Bank has doubled its financing for climate to $25 billion by 2025. Without any doubt, the African Development Bank is the leader on climate adaptation in Africa and globally. The share of our climate finance dedicated to adaptation is 67%, the highest of all multilateral development banks, and I was particularly excited when UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon singled out the bank in the UN General Assembly last year, that the bank is leading and others should follow. Your Excellencies, the bank and the to Great Africa and to improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. That's the high five strategy of the bank. But Feed Africa is the one we're talking about this morning. Let me share some things with you. Over the past 6 years that we have been doing the Feed Africa strategy of the bank, our work has provided 6 million farms with improved agricultural technologies. The bank has also been implementing a very successful program that we call Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, TAAT. Here are some of the success stories that gives us the confidence, because we are not moonlighting in agriculture. We know exactly what we're doing.
Speaking at the formal opening ceremony of the AFDB annual general meeting, Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo, who doubles as the chief host of the event, spoke of the continent's ongoing fiscal and socio-economic challenges and the importance of the African Development Bank to the continent's development goals. He said 18 African economies have faced credit downgrades amid the headwinds of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the combined effect of the debt situation, rising interest rates, and the rising cost of living are resulting in severe macroeconomic and financial instability. According to him, what is clear is that the resulting damage cannot be cured so easily with the limited fiscal tools at the disposal of the continent and the national policy adjustments. Therefore, he reiterated his call for an elevated role for Africa's premier bank, the African Development Bank. He added that the African Development Bank is in a position to drive sustained transformation in Africa With increased financial resources, the bank could recapitalize key African financial institutions such as the Regional Development Banks, Afreximbank, African Guarantee Fund, African Reinsurance Company, and Africa 50. He congratulated the African Development Fund, the concessional lending arm of the African Development Bank, on the celebration of its Golden Jubilee, saying to invest some $9 billion over the last 5 years, up from an initial $327 million in 1976, is nothing short of exemplary. He also commended the president of the African Development Bank Group, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, for his extraordinary vision, passion, and leadership, noting that the African Development Bank is now a globally reputable bank, maintaining even in difficult times its stellar AAA ratings, the only African financial institution with AAA global credit ratings. It disclosed that the African Development Bank was ranked by the prestigious Global Finance magazine as the best multilateral financial institution in the world in 2021, adding that it is equally impressive that the African Development Fund was also ranked by the Center for Global Development in the U.S. as the second best in the world among all concessional financing institutions, even ahead of the World Bank's International Development Association (IDA) and all the developed countries' 28 concessional financing institutions of the OECD countries. According to him, the case for adhering immediately to these suggestions is even more compelling, as Africa is now confronted with the consequences of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which are compounding the emerging socioeconomic vulnerabilities which have been heightened by COVID-19 since February. He said prices of staple food commodities have surged drastically, noting that Africa faces a fertilizer shortage of some 2 million metric tons this year, estimated at $2 billion, according to the International Fund for Agricultural Development, potentially creating a productivity deficit of 20 to 50% in agriculture. He maintained that rising food prices disproportionately affect African families, as food consumes some 40% of household income, compared to less than 20% in advanced economies. According to him, energy markets have been significantly volatile, with dire consequences for households and public finances. According to the IMF, a $5 per barrel increase in oil prices reduces global output by around 0.25%. But for non-oil exporting economies in Africa, that figure increases to 0.6%. As a result, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development has cut global growth prospects by 1%, and the World Economic Outlook for April 2022 predicts global growth will slow from 6.1% in 2021 to 3.6% in 2022. 0.8 percentage points lower than projected in January 2022, adding that amidst economic slowdown and rising cost of fuel and food, the cost of living is increasing. He stated that the immediate economic consequences, whether in the form of rising inflation, lower growth, increased inequality, and greater financial instability, are likely to permeate deeper as they coincide with weakened economic positions due to the pandemic and pre-existing and now elevated debt challenges. He opined that the confluence of rising challenges and expectations require that, together, Africa act with sustained conviction, saying the support will be critical to building the Africa as espoused by Agenda 2063. According to him, in addition to the pressing food, fuel, and fiscal challenges, there is the need to ensure that the remaining 85% of the continent population are vaccinated against COVID-19. The remaining 60% of health facilities on the continent are connected to reliable sources of electricity. The teeming youth, who are over 60% of the population, are better educated and equipped for the job market, that is, to become a digitally enabled entrepreneurial generation. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area transforms Africa with a combined GDP of $3.3 trillion. The physical and digital infrastructural deficits are addressed, and the unrelenting insecurity and violence creating about 2.5 million internally displaced people in the Sahel and elsewhere are permanently addressed. According to him, the stakes could not be higher and clear. To move towards resolving this, Africa must support the bank to do what the bank does.
The three-tier interchange, which has now been transformed into a four-tier interchange, and it's a tourist attraction in Ghana today. A lot of people come and have a look, but that's the most obvious. But there are several areas of our national life where, so that is why we're extremely concerned about the steps that ought to be taken collectively by all of us to strengthen the bank. I'm always upset to hear that external agencies are in a position to fund more projects in Africa than our own development agency. The African Development Bank should be the most powerful agency for financing Africa's development. I think what I'm hoping will come out of the discussions of these meetings is how that matter can be addressed, how effectively we can move down the line to make sure that the African Development Bank and its concessional in the ADF have access to the huge pool of resources out there in the globe that would enable them to play this primary function of being responsible for the development and the financing of the development of the country. I think there are some things that are obvious that need to be done. I have to look at the constitution of the bank, the constitution of the ADF, the provisions that, for instance, prohibits the ADF from being able to go to the capital markets of the world. I still don't quite understand why that should be the case, especially since that's where the money is. You hear of the figures about monies that are, if you like, in private hands as against those in public resources, and the difference is stark and dramatic. So if it is that we can't get to where the money is, it becomes very difficult to see how they can fulfill their primary function. But I believe these are some of the matters that are on the table here. Fortunately for the bank, it has a lot of support from various parts of the world. They're called regionals, who are part of the governance structure of the bank. So that the discussion is a discussion that can find, if you like, even solutions within the bank itself. People who are here representing other interests in the globe, with whom the engagement can be direct and fruitful.
Also speaking at the Ghanaian's Finance Minister Kenneth Ofori-Atta, who also doubles as the chairman of the African Development Bank Group's Board of Governors, said the stakes were high and spoke of the risk of a lost decade. According to him, Africa's economic growth contracted by 3.2% in 2020, and debt to GDP ratios edged up from 60% to 71.1%. Ofori-Atta noted. The minister said, however, that it was not all bad news. He pointed out that, in truth, growth prospects on the continent are not bleak, especially once Africa is provided with the requisite capital to succeed. Calling on the African Development Bank a reliable partner, Ofori-Atta said it was necessary to support the bank in raising competitive financing for its members to tackle the continent's greatest threats: rising fuel prices, tightening financial conditions, and climate change. He said Africa must build from the unique resilience and strengthen partnerships. Also speaking on behalf of the African Union Chairman, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Monica Sasabangwa, saluted the African Development Bank Group for its commitment to the African Union's Agenda 2063. She said the continent's access to development building blocks like better water, sanitation, and infrastructure was vital for its transformation. She added that transformation could only be achieved with an elevated role for the African Development Bank in mobilizing the needed resources. In the meantime, the revenue made by the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation from crude oil sales in 1 year has been put at 1.7 trillion naira. The corporation's latest monthly and financial report for August said the sum was earned from March 2020 to March 2021 after it lifted a total of 108 million barrels of crude oil within the year at an average price of $43 per barrel. A breakdown of the report showed that in March 2020, the oil and gas firm lifted approximately 9,490 million barrels, 11,400 in November, and 7,539 million barrels in December 2020. In January 2021, it lifted 5,542 million barrels, 9,390, making it a total of 108 million barrels for the period under review. The crude, NNPC said, was lifted from the daily allocation for domestic utilization, translating to an average volume of 243,650 barrels of oil per day. In terms of performance, price fluctuations within the period range from $25 per barrel in March 2020 to $17 per barrel and the monthly crude oil production figures are stated above. NNPC said it earned approximately 71 billion naira in March, 69 billion naira in 2020. The NNPC earned 124 billion naira in January 2021, 230 billion naira in February, and 184 billion naira in March 2021. The corporation put the total revenue from sales at 1.7 trillion naira within the period under review.
Hello out there. What business are you into? How have you been able to finance your business? Is your business affected by the inflationary trend? Are you thinking of expanding your business outfits? Are you in need of information on the economy, stocks, financial and money markets, dividends, and the likes? Business and financial matters every Monday between 2:30 and 3 p.m. on OSBC television. Business and financial issues. News at your doorsteps.